Welcome back to the kitchen at Andersen Acres. We're going to have a little bit of fun today because over the last couple days we have been making cookies, sugar cookies. We made standard sugar cookies, and we made gluten-free for my sister who can't have gluten. We would like to decorate those cookies because they look kind of plain. They're not really Christmassy. So we're going to make some icing so that we can decorate our cookies. This is a cookie icing, the type of icing that you can flood your cookies with. So there's a very specific recipe that allows you to get exactly the right consistency. We start with 4 cups of icing sugar, also called powdered sugar. What it's called depends on where you are. Here it's called icing sugar. It's for making icing. To that you're going to want to add 5 tablespoons of milk. Yep, milk. You can substitute water if you need dairy-free. It's not going to be quite as rich, but it's doable. Next, you want white corn syrup. Okay, this is lily white corn syrup. You do need white corn syrup. If you use a dark corn syrup, your icing is going to turn dark instead of white. Yes, you need the corn syrup. You have to use the corn syrup, otherwise your icing isn't going to harden properly and it's going to end up a little bit splotchy. So technically you can do it without the corn syrup, but it won't be the same quality. So you're just going to do 4 teaspoons. I'm just going to guesstimate. That looks like a teaspoon. That looks like a teaspoon. That looks like a teaspoon. Just 4 teaspoons. So you don't need a ton. Now you want some kind of flavoring. You can use a vanilla, you can use a peppermint extract. I'm going to use this butter flavoring. You can use any flavoring you like. You only need about a teaspoon of it. You do want to use a clear flavoring. There we go. You want to use a clear flavoring just because you don't want your icing to get dyed the color of the extract. So yes, you can use vanilla. I would look for the clear vanilla extract that you can find in stores instead of the standard dark. So now we're going to use the whisk attachment on our electric beater. I'm going to get right down in there. Before you turn the whisk on, just move it around a little bit because it's going to make a little bit of a mess. Okay, so just kind of do it by hand for a minute just to get things kind of wet. And then we're going to turn this on. We're going to turn it on low, and I am going to turn the volume back down just because irritating sound. Here we go. Okay, when your icing looks like that, you know you need a little bit more milk, but you want to let it sit. Let it sit for about 3 minutes. I'm going to turn off the recorder because we don't need to stand and stare at it. But then we're going to go fetch 2 more tablespoons of milk. We won't need much more. You'll probably only need 1 tablespoon, but we're going to get 2 just in case. But let that sit for about 3 minutes just so the ingredients can incorporate. All right, so our icing has sat for a couple of minutes. We're going to add a little bit more milk. I'm going to add only 1 tablespoon at a time, just because if you add too much, it could get too runny. Push your beater down into the middle, turn it on, and very, very carefully mix in that new milk. go. It should look about like that. It should flow, but it shouldn't be so loose that it flows all over the place. So you want it thin enough to go through a piping bag, because we are going to use a piping bag to flood our cookies, but you don't want it so loose that it'll fly right off the edges of the cookies, right? You want it to stay where you put it. That is our icing. So you can dye it a color if you like. I am going to divide mine and dye some red and some green, because that's what I need to do, because I have a pattern in mind for my cookies. You can also just leave it white if you like. So I'm going to stop the video, divide my icing into a couple of bowls, and we'll come back when I'm sitting at the table and we will start decorating a couple cookies. All right, so we are here at the table getting ready to ice our cookies. What are you going to need? You're going to take your icing and put it in a piping bag. I've used a very small tip because I want to control my flow really well, because I don't want my icing to end up everywhere. You can also separate out some of the icing you made and dye it, or you can just grab yourself a couple of these tubes from the grocery store if you're not using very much of any one color. I'm only using a little bit of each color, so I just decided, instead of dividing out the things like I said I was going to do, I'm not going to. I'm just going to use these because they're in my cupboard. But this is a good icing for the base because it's a nice flood icing. So I'm using a reusable bag, and I've got a little clip on the bottom so that the icing doesn't come out this side. You don't want it to come out that side. So pick your cookie to start. It doesn't really matter which cookie you start with. You're also going to need a, what is it called? A toothpick. Okay. So now we've a little outline. You don't need much of an outline. Okay, you don't need much of an outline. Give that a good squeeze, come out the bottom. You don't want it to come out too fast. You don't have to be perfect. I'm not perfect at all. I'm really bad at this. You can add a little more milk if you want more flow. I don't, because I'm really bad at this. If I have too much flow, it flows right off the edge of my cookie. Okay. Get that in there. All right. There we go. Now, if you need to move your icing around a little bit, you just use the end of a toothpick. Okay, help smooth that out. There we go. Smooth out where you want it to smooth out. It helps control where it's going. There we go. Give that a minute so you can figure out exactly where you're going to do your next step. I'm just going to move this cookie just so I'm closer to me. All right, what I'm going to do is attempt to do a little wreath. So I'm going to take, you have to work with the icing still wet, by the way. So I'm going to just take this and just do some little dots of green. Okay, just little dots of green. It's okay if they, because I kind of want them to kind of do some funky things. Green, green, green. There we go. It doesn't have to look perfect. You don't have to be perfect. I am not particularly good at this. If I can do this, anyone can, because I'm really bad at decorating. I'm better at the baking. So then you just take this and you just kind of move it through the icing. Up and down, create some swirls. Up and down, create some swirls. There you go, up and down. There you go. Use your, there we go, or that peak that I made, because I'm so good at this. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of red. I'm just going to make some red berries. That's all I'm going to do. Just some berries. That's a berry. That's a berry. That's a berry. That's a berry. Just a couple of little red berries. I'm really bad at this. This just gives you an idea of what you can do. I've done better ones, but I'm kind of in a rush right now. There. That's my little wreath. I'm just putting a little wreath on a cookie, just because it's just for the family anyway, so you just let that sit. Now this flood icing is going to have to sit. That white icing is flood icing. It has to sit for about 16 hours, maybe as much as 24, depending on the humidity in your home. But once it's hardened, you can stack them on top of each other. Right now I can't stack them because that's still wet. But let it dry thoroughly. You can, of course, eat them whenever you like. But let it dry thoroughly, and it'll look fantastic. It'll taste fantastic. We'll come back in a few minutes, and I will decorate the candy canes I made. Remember, these are the gluten-free cookies. That's why they have the blue, just to mark that they were gluten-free. So after I'm done the gluten-free, we'll come back, and I will decorate a candy cane in much the same fashion. All right, so we're back to decorate the non-gluten-free, the standard cookies, because we wanted to do the gluten-free first just so we could avoid any contamination, because it is really important if you are doing a food that is absent a certain thing like gluten that you don't cross-contaminate later on, because we don't want to make people sick. Specifically, I don't want to make my sister sick. So now we're going to start decorating the standard sugar cookies. Now these are even a different shape, so there's not really any danger of mixing them up with the gluten-free. So we're going to again start with our white flood icing. Just go around, do our basic outline. I switched to a fairly thick tip for these ones because I don't care as much. It's not really that big a deal. Get your icing on there. Da, da, da. Now, candy canes are really easy to do. Pick your color. I'm going to do red. I'll probably end up doing red, green, and mostly blues because I like blues a lot. But we're just going to stripes. Do stripes. So we just do stripes. We just do stripes. Stripe at the end there. And I'm not good at this, so mine don't look fantastic, but they look good enough for a family event. That's all you can really hope for, unless you're a professional. If you're a professional, I'm assuming you're not watching these videos for tips and tricks. There we go. See? Little candy cane. And we'll do another one, and we'll do a blue one. So grab this again. We'll just flood our cookie. Go around the edge first. It's easier to flood your cookie. Now I could thin it out and use the thinner icing for the middle, but I'm not that fussy. I don't like getting that fussy. I don't want to make it that difficult. There we go. So I just use one consistency. If you need to smooth it out a little bit, you just use the edge of a toothpick and just kind of push it around a little bit. You typically don't have to do that too much. I'm going to do it a little bit here, but you don't really have to do that too much. So now we're just going to do a blue. So we're just going to blue stripe. You should know that blues bleed a little bit more. So when you do use a pre-made blue icing on your flood, you might get a little more bleeding. But that's okay. You can always dye your own flood icing and you'll have less bleeding. But this is a pre-made one that was in the cupboard anyway, so I might as well get it because I want to use it up. And I just dropped the lid. But I'm going to decorate the rest. I'm not going to do that on camera because it'll get really boring. And we'll come back and we'll look at the finished product of both our little wreaths that are gluten-free and our non-gluten-free candy canes. I know that one doesn't look that impressive. That doesn't matter. All right, our cookies have been iced. I am not a professional, and you can see I ran out of green and had to switch to blue. Then I ran out of blue and had to switch to yellow, and then I ran out of both. So at some point, I completely ran out of icing. No big deal. But you can see the gluten-free ones are pretty solid. They were done first. They just look like little wreaths. They're awfully cute. I'll just lift one up so you can see it a little bit better. See how cute that is? Yeah, it's cute. And then we have the candy canes, which are not gluten-free. Look at that. They look nice. You don't have to be a professional to make something that looks nice. Now, we do need to let the icing set. And even though it feels pretty dry to the touch, if I were to push into it, it is not dry underneath. So these do need to sit overnight. Do not put them in the fridge. They need to sit at room temperature. Okay, room temperature all the way. Don't cover them. You can cover them lightly just to keep your cats from licking the icing, but don't put them in an airtight container. They need the air circulation. I have the rest of them sitting on cutting boards in the kitchen. So you can also thin down your icing a little bit by adding 1 or 2 extra tablespoons of milk when you're mixing your icing if you want it to flow a little better. I like it a little bit stiffer. It keeps it from going everywhere, but consistency is all up to you. Only add icing 1 tablespoon of milk, only add milk 1 tablespoon at a time. Simply because if you add too much milk at a time, all of a sudden it's thinned down and now you have to start all over again. So that is the flood icing, the flood cookie icing. And it's really easy to make, really fun to make, and you can do it at any time of year, not just during the holidays. I did it during the holidays because that's the time of year it is, but I also make sugar cookies for birthdays and other holidays. So, hope you had fun making flood icing with us today, and we'll see you tomorrow.